Hi, I'm Luke Hanson McDonald. This is my podcast about family business, and I hope you brought a pint glass. Today's guest is Andrew Oland. He is the CEO and co-owner of Moosehead Breweries. Andrew shares the incredible beer brewing family legacy that has now spanned 6 generations of the Oland family. He also shares why the family split into 2 branches, one of which ultimately sold to Labatt Breweries, the other of which is his branch, remained independent and family owned and eventually became Moosehead. We discuss the challenging dynamics of the beer industry and how younger people are now drinking less and less alcohol and what that means for his business. And if you stick around to the end, you'll learn how Andrew and his brother not only co-own Moosehead, but have a successful partnership working as CEO and CFO running the business together. All right, this is Beyond the Family Business Podcast. Please like and subscribe. All right, let's jump into it. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
So my name is Andrew Oland. I'm president and CEO of Moosehead Breweries. And what I do is I'm run Moosehead Breweries.
Awesome. And where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but I lived for 25 plus years in St. John, New Brunswick.
And you're from one of the most recognizable family businesses in Atlantic Canada. As I said before this, I know many different Olands. I've grown up with many different people with that last name. What generation are you in of the Oland family?
So I would be in generation 6 of the Oland family.
Wow. So that would explain there's a lot of branches once you get to generation 6. Also very rare in, call it the new world in Canada, to see generation 6. Like it's a lot of sort of Gen 2, Gen 3 that I run into. So that's pretty incredible. And on that note, do you work with any family members day to day?
Yes. My brother Patrick is our chief financial officer. Patrick and I are also co-owners now of Moosehead. So we work very closely together. And my father, Derek, who's in his mid 80s, is still very much takes an active interest in the business.
Very cool. I work with my brother, and my dad is also active, but enjoys golfing a lot. So, I guess I'll start off with, I'd love to hear, where did the family business story begin?
Sure. In 1865, Susanna Oland moved from England to Halifax with her 9 children. So all of the Olands all start from this woman, Susanna. Her husband, John, had moved to Halifax a year or so before. They had suffered or struggled financially in England, and they came to Halifax to start fresh. Susanna brewed beer out of her home in England, was not uncommon at the time. So when she got to Halifax, she was able to secure a bit of financing. And in 1867, she and John started a brewery. Shortly after, John died. He actually fell off his horse. Whether he had drunk too much beer or not, no one never knows. And Susanna ran the business, which would have been really unusual for that time. Very unusual for a woman to be involved in business, particularly at the highest levels, and even more so something with beverage alcohol. And when Susanna died in 1885, she did something unusual for the time. She left the business to her youngest son, George W.C. Oland. And it turned out to be a pretty good decision because he ran the business for the next 43 years. Yeah, 43 years, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
And that included the Halifax explosion, which occurred in December of 1917. It's at that time, Luke, where you start to get the Oland family split up. So right now, your generation 2 owns the business and generation 3 is involved in the business. The brewery in Halifax is destroyed. A member of the family died. 5 other uh, employees of the brewery died that day. Massive tragedy for Halifax. So my great great grandfather, George W.C. Oland, sends his son, my great grandfather, to St. John to buy a brewery, which he did in 1918. And at the time, a brewery in Halifax competing with a brewery in St. John would be like you and I going to the moon tomorrow. It just wasn't cool. And so from that point, you sort of get this emergence of these Halifax Olands, St. John Olands. The Halifax Olands, it would buy the Alexander Keith's brewery. They would operate their brewery until the early 1970s when they sold to Labatt's. But Labatt's has continued to run a brewery in Nova Scotia to this day. The brewery on Agricola Street actually has the Oland name on it. Labatt's
Yeah.
has the Oland trademark. We can't put a beer out with the Oland name on it. They have it trademarked. And so, here we are today in 2025.
Okay. And so just to clarify that, so the Halifax Olands had Keith's and then eventually sold that business to Labatt, and Labatt still operates the Oland export brewery that the brewery down at Agricola. And then what about the St. John Olands? What happened with that branch of the family?
Yeah, so that would be my side of the family. So uh, we um, we have stayed independent. So went from my great grandfather to my grandfather. Philip Oland, who would have run the business through the 60s and 70s. And then my father started to get more involved in the late 70s. That's when we expanded to the United States. At the time, it was very difficult for us to expand to the rest of Canada. We would have actually had to have built a brewery in Ontario or Quebec to do that, which made no sense. So we expanded to the United States. And
And was that because of cost or because of prohibitive interprovincial laws,
prohibitive interprovincial laws, laws which,
which are maybe about to go away finally?
well, I'll believe it when I see it. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs will win the Stanley Cup before the laws go away. It's there's just so many of these, and they're so relatively small. Um, I, I, I I think it's highly unlikely that these will go away anytime soon. Yeah, so here we are today. As I say, my brother Patrick and I, we run the business. Um, and we have our own brands as well. We're the Canadian importer for the Boston Beer Company. So that would be brands such as Twisted Tea, Truly Hard Seltzer. And For a while, Sam Adams and Angry Orchard, but those brands are actually made in the US. We haven't been selling them for a few months, but Twisted Tea and Truly are actually made in Canada. So we've been
Oh,
still
very
able to
cool.
sell
So
them.
that's like a licensing deal with those brands to produce them here, type of thing.
Um, yeah, we do the selling and the distribution and the marketing. Depending on which province in Canada it is, beverage alcohol is sold in a different fashion in each province, and
Right.
sometimes we distribute it, sometimes we don't. Just depends how it works.
When the family split and there was the St. John faction of the Olands, what was the name of that brewery at the time?
Yeah, so they first bought a brewery uh, in uptown St. John, and then 1928, the location where I am today, there was something called the James Reddy's Brewery that was purchased, as I say, in 1928, and over time it became Moosehead Breweries. But you have to understand, back in the 20s and 30s, we just made beer. Like, there wasn't a lot of branding, there wasn't a lot of complexity. We made, really one style of beer. We made, uh, ales, until 1937, and then we started to make lagers, and it wasn't really till you get into the 40s, you get this started to see more brands emerge.
And what was the genesis of the Moosehead name? Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, it was a brand that was sort of on the books in 1928 when my great grandfather purchased the James Ready Brewery, and then when at the time we were called New Brunswick Breweries, and my great grandfather wanted to expand to Nova Scotia and PEI, and figured something better than New Brunswick Breweries would go over in those markets. Moosehead was there, and so he chose Moosehead, and we would say that Moosehead says Canada probably better than any other brand name that's out there.
Right, right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's always surprising, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but when I go to the US, it's quite often Moosehead is the brand that people know of in Canada. And it's just interesting that because I think the name's so recognizable as well. I know quite a few Americans that specifically go to Canada to buy Moosehead.
Yeah, yeah, it's, we as I say, we've been selling in the US since the late 70s. It's a good market for us, and, as we all know, sort of the Maritimes, which is our core home market, it's only about 2,000,000 people, so you take the rest of Canada, the rest of US, there's a lot more people there.
What roles, or let me start off by saying, did you always want to join the family business? Did was that as a kid the type of thing you grew up around and you wanted to be part of?
Yeah, I would say yes. My parents did a really, really good job. It was not pushed or encouraged in any way. It was really clear when we were younger that the only place we were going to work after school, after university, was not Moosehead. Like we have a rule in the family, you have to work somewhere else. So that was very clear. But I think the family business sort of you know, gets in your bones. And then the beer business is it's challenging business, but it's a lot of fun too as well.
Yeah, for sure. So where did you work after you graduated from school?
I worked actually at the Halifax shipyards on the shores of Halifax Harbor. I started there. I was management trainee for a couple of years, and then I was a project planner for the construction of a tugboat, which every time I go to Halifax, I check, and it hasn't sunk yet. It's called the Pointe de Barteau. So yeah, it was great learning experience. And then from there, actually, my family and we moved to St. John, and my first job would have been working in the brewery. I would have been a foreman in our packaging area, and then a series of roles in both operations. Then I wanted to go back. I wanted to move to the sales, marketing, the commercial side of the business. So I went back, did an MBA, and then a series of sales and marketing roles after that.
Very cool. And when did your brother join the business?
Yeah, Patrick had a slightly different career. After university, he worked at various marketing firms in Toronto. He then did his MBA, and then he decided to take very much a shift, and he moved to the finance side of the business. Went back to school, did a CA, now we call it a CPA, but a chartered accountancy at the time, and sort of started from scratch there. Um, and then from there, quickly moved into the finance world at Moosehead. It was really valuable because a big part of our business is the sales and marketing side of the business, and for Patrick to have exposure to that side of the business, plus obviously all the finance stuff, has been extremely valuable.
That's a very unique mix of experience. Usually, you might see an ops finance person, but it's not very common in my experience, at least, that you see a person in, sales, marketing, and finance. I feel like they're almost kind of polar opposites as far as personality goes sometimes.
Yeah, they are a little. I mean, what we talk to the team here, particularly on the marketing side, is there's a lot of analytics, there's a lot of financial discipline, there's a lot of budget management to the marketing side of the business. But it's certainly a little untraditional approach, and also tough for Patrick because he was sort of, I think, late 20s, early 30s when he sort of went down this uh, road with, kids who were just out of university.
Could you speak to me a little bit about some of the challenges you've faced since you've taken on the CEO role? And, maybe what is the biggest challenge you faced and sort of how did it impact you?
Yeah, lots of challenges. As you look back, they may be not as significant as they were when you were going through. I've been president since 2008. Um, I think that one of the things with a family business is a family business is sort of it's always evolving, and you have to be both anticipating and then reacting to what's happening around you in terms of your customers and your competitors. A specific challenge we've faced was in 2015. We had a significant contract to make beer for another company. It was tens of millions of dollars a year for confidentiality reasons. I can't get into the specifics about who it was. And we ended up that contract was moved actually back sort of home to where their brand was originally brewed. And so that was a big hit. And we had to evolve and evolve quickly. And really fortunate at the time, got involved with a guy named Murph Sims and his company Simplicity Designs. And
Oh,
they
yeah. Yeah, no, I met Merv before.
Yeah, and, they're focused on improvement and creating a culture of improvement, and it was really, really helpful. I wouldn't wanna go through that again, but, as in most of these situations, we came out a stronger company, after that. And we had a pretty good COVID. And I think a lot of the lessons that I learned from Merv and his team and that my team learned were really helpful as we dealt with the challenges of COVID, particularly the early days around COVID.
Mm. Yeah, no, I could imagine. Um, and was your brother working in the business in the current role at that time in 2015?
Yeah, Patrick has been CFO since sort of 2012ish. So we were there together working through it, and uh, yeah, the team, the particular senior team, really came together and acted as one, and I'm very proud of the result because it was some challenging times.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. It sounds like it. Yeah, I've been lucky that my brother has been very supportive of me when I've gone through failures before. So I was sort of trying to get an idea of I could imagine if you were literally working side by side like you guys are, um, that must I would imagine it would help shoulder the load a little bit to have, family next to you working along through it.
Yeah, one of the things I say is that look, Patrick's our CFO. So if your CEO and CFO aren't getting along or aren't in agreement most of the time, then you've got problems. But I would say about 7 or 8 times a year, Patrick will say, "Look, Andrew, I think you need to think about that. I'm not sure I do that." And probably of those 7 or 8 times, 6 or 7, I'll go back and I'll say, "Yeah, you're right, Patrick. I thought about it, and I agree with you." But I would say once or twice a year, I'll say, "Patrick, yep, look, I've thought it through. I've reflected on your uh, feedback, your opinion, but you know what? I've decided we're going to do this." And Patrick says, "Great," and that's what we do. And if it works out, it works out, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But it doesn't happen that often. But it does happen, from time to time, and but we work hard to have not just Patrick and I, but my entire senior team, a culture of respect, but also a culture where we can challenge one another, talk in a respectful manner, and make sure that we're sort of fully looking at an issue before a decision is made.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's incredibly important to have that candor and that transparent discussion. Um, did that take a while for you and your brother to find that, that dynamic between the two of you, or was it sort of natural since you were younger, or, what was that journey like?
Um, I think there's always been a lot of respect, and just as brothers, I have I have 3 younger brothers, so uh I'm the oldest, then Patrick, then I have 2 younger brothers who are not in the business, and so, I think Patrick and I always ended up doing a lot of stuff together, whether it was Boy Scouts or whatever. Um, so there's always been, we were always together, and then there's, a fair amount of we didn't work a lot together in our 20s, and that was probably positive. So when we started to work together closer in our 30s, in some ways he was just, well, he's just another colleague. So as opposed to, you um, the guy I shared a room with when I was growing up and stuff like that. But we work hard to have the time to talk through issues, and not surprising, just try as much as possible, no surprises. And the one of the things I really work on is just with my team is, um, I say no surprises, so they have to bring me the bad news. So that means I can't react to it.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to react to the bad news, then people aren't going to bring it to you no matter what. So,
Yeah.
that's a
Absolutely.
skill I've had to develop over the years.
Yeah. No, that's a great mantra to have. Um, how about your other siblings? Are they involved at a board level or anything like that, or are you and your brother the sole owners, so to speak, from your
No,
family?
they're not. Patrick and I are the sole owners, and my brother Matthew uh, worked here for a period of time, but he's now in Toronto doing his own entrepreneurial things. So my brother Giles is an entrepreneur in various businesses in Halifax. The reality is the business is sort of a medium-sized business, and there's only space for so many members of the family, particularly in a leadership role, and 2 is certainly
Mhm.
enough around that leadership table.
And as far as given you and your brother are the owners and you're also, running the business together in your executive capacity, do you have a separate governance mechanism for, call it board discussions when you put that hat on versus executive discussion, or is it all really just blended together?
So, we have an advisory board with 3 outside advisors, and we meet quarterly, and we treat it like a board of directors. Both my team and I, we prepare for it, all the standard, the annual plan, CapEx plan, multi-year plans, uh, goes through the advisory board. What we've learned over the years is, you'll attract good people to your advisory board if you listen to them. And so
Yeah.
we make a point of listening to them. And I would say our advisory board is not a fiduciary board, but we act as it is. And the feedback and the counsel from our advisors is invaluable. And then the formal board of directors, it's much more, I'll call it perfunctory, with Patrick and I and my father. The meat of things is at the advisory board level.
Yeah, no, that makes a great deal of sense. How did you select your advisory board members? What was the process to find the right fit?
Um, so it started when my grandfather died in 1996. My father set up an advisory board. He felt that was appropriate at the time, and he reached out and he had some really good members of that board, including Sir Graham Day was on it, John Bragg was on it, and so it kept a very high level of involvement in terms of advisors. and we've just continued on. So it's been going almost 30 years now, and with a turnover of advisors over time, and it's something that I would strongly recommend to any family business. But I say that the challenge, though, is you have to listen to your advisors, because good lot advisors will show up as long as you listen to them. But
Yeah.
if they won't, if you're not going to listen to them, you don't have to listen. You have to listen to everything. You don't have to agree with everything. You don't have to act with but you do have to listen. And that would be a piece of advice I would have for all family businesses.
No, that is excellent advice. Um, Shifting gears a little bit, um, back to, the beer business. The beer industry is an interesting one. I'm an observer and obviously a consumer, but it seems like there's been a lot of change over the last, 10, 15 years as far as the proliferation of microbreweries, and now it seems like quite a few of them are actually going bankrupt. Probably too much, concentration of microbreweries or something along those lines. What are sort of some of the trends going on now, and sort of what's new with your business?
Yeah, unfortunately, Luke, the trends for beer in North America, or frankly in the developing world, are not good. Beer consumption is going down in most developed countries in the world, and on per capita basis is even worse. There's lots of factors. There's lots more competition. Demographics have a big impact on that, and so it's challenging. It's a challenging industry, and there are pockets of growth within specific segments or categories of beer, but overall, the beer industry is not a growing business.
And is there opportunity for innovation, within the industry as far as new types of products that are standing out, or what's your view on that?
For sure. I mean, there's things in our business now that, are sort of bigger, that are growing, that, no one was talking about 10 years ago. That would be things, obviously, non-alc beer is a big part of that. We are
Hmm.
not in non-alc beer at the moment. We're looking hard at it, but not right now. We used to have light. Now we've got light beer and ultra light beer. Um, and then you've seen in which is a close segment of beer, what we call ready to drink beverages. Those are growing and tend to be sweeter, and younger particular consumers in particular tend to gravitate to those earlier, sort of when they become legal drinking age. But there's always going to be opportunities, and that's the challenge, is try to find those and take advantage of them.
Yeah. How do you pick? Because you're right. There's so many trends that come and go. How do you, decide where to spend your time on what could be the start of a brand new market versus maybe just a flash in the pan?
Yeah. So the first thing you do is, the folks around here know I have an expert. You don't leave the one who you brought to the dance. So you continue to focus on your core portfolio, because in our case, brands such as Moosehead Lager are still, they're large brands. We still think they still have potential for growth. But then beyond that, you're trying to find, is there insight? Is there something the consumer is looking for that we believe is either not being met or not being met satisfactorily? And we try to approach it from that manner.
Fair. And does acquisition really come into play in a strategy like yours, or is that not logical as far as brand acquisition goes?
We've looked at it, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I haven't been able to figure out how to create something that makes sense. As you spoke to, there's been this massive proliferation of breweries in North America and around the world. To give you a perspective, there's over 1,000 breweries now in Canada. So there's a ton of breweries. Most of them
Crazy.
are really small, and no one has really figured out a way to bring these all together or bring some of them together. Some of the bigger players have bought brands, but they've been pretty opportunistic and filling holes in their portfolio.
Uh,
And so, yeah, let's just say we're skeptical around acquisitions.
okay, and then we're getting close to the end here, so just shifting back to sort of the family side of things. Um, I wonder if you could give some advice. You know, you have a good relationship with your dad, you have a good relationship with your brother. You guys have successfully gone through a transition, between generations. Could you give some advice to a family that's considering succession, and sort of what are some of the ingredients that made that feasible for you?
Yeah, I would say, 3 things, Luke. First of all, is my father has a great expression, "Nose in, hands out." And since I've been, running the company since 2008, together with Patrick since 2012, my father's been very supportive. Over the first few years, we learned sort of what decisions I could make on my own, what decisions I had to tell him about in advance, and what decisions I had to seek his approval. But you know, there he let Patrick and I run the company, and we didn't feel that we were being micromanaged or second guessed, and that takes a tremendous amount of strength for him to do that. And I would say that uh, to sort of the business owners or to the older generation, if you're not going to let the next generation run the business, then you have to ask yourself why that is.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust them, then maybe you should look at another option.
Uh-huh.
Um, the role of an advisory board, I think, is important. We spoke to it earlier, but it's been very um, helpful. And it also can play a role sort of between one generation and another. And then just on a personal level, really work hard to keep business at the brewery, at the office. The last thing I want to do is be going over for Sunday dinner and, how are your numbers this week? Like ask me on Friday or ask me on Monday, but don't ask me on Sunday afternoon. And don't ask me in front of my wife and kids. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's uh separate family from the business. And so and that's I that's worked uh you know really, really well. And just keeping them separate, and by and large, discussing work at work.
Yeah. Oh, great advice. Um, how about as far as charitable giving goes? You know, you've been part of a family that's been successful in our community for a long time. I'm sure you agree that the community supports your business the same amount as you give back to it, and so it's, from my perspective, a very important part of, and I know families like yours have been longtime generous donors in our community. How does that fit into, your perspective as a leader of the business now?
Um, it's a very important part. It's something that gives me satisfaction. What we tend to do is we wait till once a year, typically around Christmas, and we will make decisions on what we're going to support. Um, we we just found it easier, and it's something that I brought in, is if you do it on an annual basis, you can sort of you can collect everything, you can see what the opportunities are. And then you can make one decision, and then you can focus the rest of the time on running a better business, which will hopefully give you a bit more money the next time in terms of giving away. And I think anyone who's doing sort of the larger projects understands the different cycles that companies are on. So yeah, that would be a piece of advice I would give to folks is make these decisions. Everyone's generous, but make these decisions sort of under your time frame.
That's excellent advice. We've actually, as a family, in the last year and a half or 2 years, we've switched much more to that approach, because otherwise you're just reacting constantly, and it's almost a first come first serve basis, which is not great because maybe there's a great cause later in the year, and you just committed early, and
Exactly.
so we've really tried to switch to now be like, all right, let's have a meeting where we all present a few ideas, discuss what we like, and then we proactively decide rather than react.
And you never know what's going to happen, right? We're sitting here in July. Unfortunately, with climate change and things like that, there seems to be more disasters, more things coming up. So it just gives you a chance to have sort of the whole agenda, the whole menu of opportunities in front of you when you make the decision.
Yeah. No, that's excellent advice. Um, Last question. You mentioned you have kids. I don't know. Does your brother have children as well?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
And are they at an age yet where you're starting to think about next generation, or are they showing any interest, or is it too early to tell?
Yeah. I mean, I have three adult children and actually one grandchild and a second on the way. So, um, two of my three children are interested in Moosehead. They're currently not working at Moosehead, but we'll see what happens. In the years to come. Patrick's children are a little younger. I think one's out of university, one's in university, and one's just about to enter university. So they're sort of earlier in their cycle, but it's it's something that we're starting to think about.
And is there anything, one of the things that often comes up in these conversations is the current generation says, oh, well, the previous generation didn't really get it right, so I want to tweak it a little bit as far as succession goes. Is there anything you want to change as far as how you were introduced to the business, or how your succession worked?
Um, that's an interesting question. Um, I think my father did a very good job. It's can be it's a very personal uh topic for discussion. One of the things that my father did was he invited uh my brother and I into our advisory board meetings before we were on the executive team at Moosehead. And so I've started to do that with two of my children who are interested in the business, and so we'll see what happens from there.
Oh, very cool. Thank you so much for sharing so much with us today, and telling us all about the incredible family story. And I wish you all the best on the future of your business and your family.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's been a real pleasure. Good afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for watching. This is Beyond the Family Business Podcast. Take care.